I am part of the Tuesday, we used to call them senior group, but I'm not sure what we call them anymore, SAMs. And we meet on the first and third Tuesdays of every month, so if anyone has not come and you need to join us, we have a lot of fun. We play games and stuff on the first Tuesday, and the third Tuesday we have a special like we're having today. So I'm going to introduce Roger Ellison, and he is going to introduce our speaker.
Linda and I moved to San Angelo in 1989 so that I could become the CEO at the West Texas Boys Ranch. And I spent 4 years at the ranch and then moved on. And there have been a lot of changes. I was brought in as a change agent. And in one of my early conversations with a board member, he said, Roger, there's a lot of fixing that we need to do, but we don't need you to change anything. And I thought, oh, we've got a problem here. Jeremy has been the master of transitioning the Boys Ranch to a new style of operation and new management. Jerry and I are really good friends. He's normally used to a lot of fluff when he's introduced, but I'm not going to give him that this morning. After he presents, we're going to talk. We're going to ask you questions, see if you have any questions, and Jerry and I are going to talk about the ranch. So, Jerry, let's get rolling.
Thank you, Roger. And do you need this? No, I've got one in my ear. Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Jeremy Vincent, and I have been with the West Texas Boys Ranch. July 1st will be 16 years. And Roger alluded to our friendship, and I appreciate the friendship that we have. There's not many people who can understand the things that I deal with on a regular basis, whether it be with the boys, the board, the donors, the community. But Roger understands that. And so Roger's been a special mentor to me whenever there's issues that I need to voice. He's always given me that lending ear. So Roger, although you weren't nice to me on the introduction, I'm being nice to you right now. So thank you for that. First I just want to talk about West Texas Boys Ranch as an organization. We've been here since 1947, and we were started by the Downtown Optimist Club. And at that time, a lot of children's homes or boys ranches were being created. And there was a huge need to give boys, but just kids in general, an opportunity to be successful. The types of kids and the reasons behind getting those kids back in the 40s and 50s are different than the reasons we get them now. But the need is still there, and the need just continues to grow. So back in the early days, it was orphans, single parents not being able to afford, versus what we are dealing with today. But, back early on at Boys Ranch, we started very small. Then we started building dormitories, and we may have 70 or 80 kids out there at the ranch in a dormitory style setting. But we changed that back in the 80s. Very forward-thinking board of directors at the time and staff who made a change and said, we want to go to a family-based model of care. And there was probably a decade of transitioning into that. So today, at full capacity, we can have 39 boys at one time. We may help 45 to 50 boys within a 12-month period. They don't all come in at the same time, and they don't all leave at the same time. That number is very dynamic. But that's how many kids we can serve at full capacity. Since I've been at the West Texas Boys Ranch, the board of directors have been very forward-thinking. And What they want to do is help as many kids as we possibly can within our community, however that looks. They don't have to come to Boys Ranch to receive services from our organization. So in 2013, we took over Sunrisa's Trails Therapeutic Riding, and they provide equine therapy for kids as young as 3 years of age. They have physical disabilities, emotional or mental disabilities, and so the board back in 13 said we want to help as many kids as possible. We weren't in the business of helping handicapped children, but we know what equine therapy can do for boys on the ranch. And they do the same thing for anybody, whether you have a disability or not. But through that program, we can help over 100 kids a year at our equine therapy program. 2 years ago, we took over Concho Valley Home for Girls. They do the same thing that we do at West Texas Boys Ranch, identical. They are not living out there at the ranch. They live here in town, but they do the same thing that we do. We can have up to 6 girls in the home. It's just a small home. And we have a transition program that last year we helped 83 kids who are currently in foster care or those who have aged out of foster care up to the age of 26. And we help them in many different ways. Being a foster care kid means that you may not always have that mom and dad you can call whenever you need help. Or if you need an extra $100 to pay an electric bill, you don't have anybody you can call most of the time. We are those people with that program. And so, like I said, going back, we want to help as many kids in the Concho Valley in San Angelo, Texas as we possibly can. And with that being said, all of our agencies, all of our programs are faith-based. It's very important. Our Christian background is very important. And if we don't do anything right with any of our kids that we serve, other than introduce them into a life with Christ, we've done our job. We've done our job, because that's the number one goal that we have. So getting back to Boys Ranch, and one of the biggest questions that I get quite often is, what kind of kids do you get? And sometimes they will say, you get only good kids out there, or some people will say, you must get really bad kids out there. And both of those are an extreme. We get good kids that come from bad situations. If you can imagine the environments that they come from, and so it may be they're growing up with a single mother. Maybe mom has boyfriends coming in and out of the home. Maybe there's physical abuse from those men that come in and out of the house on a regular basis. Sometimes we have aunts and uncles who are helping find placement. We've gotten calls from schools who have identified kids within the ISD, and they say, what can we do to get this kid out there to the West Texas Boys Ranch? We take kids through juvenile probation. They've already been put into the system, so to speak. Great-grandmothers have placed kids out there at the West Texas Boys Ranch. We are licensed to take kids as young as 6 years of age, up to 17. We don't get a lot of calls on kids that young. If we're getting calls on kids that are 6, they may need more help than what we are able to provide. And so the youngest kid that I've ever received at the ranch was 8 years old. And he was placed by his great-grandmother, and she placed Ramiro, who was 8, and Eddie, his uncle, who was 13. We don't take money from the state. We privately fundraise the money that we need to operate our program. And we don't charge the families who need to place their kids at Boys Ranch. There's no fee associated with that. We ask that families, if they can, contribute something. so that they have a vested interest in that boy being out there. So we have some families that may commit to paying $5 a month. Families that are receiving child support for that boy, we ask that that money comes with the child. That's the intent. But we never turn away a boy because the family cannot pay. That is very important to us, and it means that we have to go out in the community and we have to have fundraising events like the ranch ball that was just started, that we just had in January. We've got the Emmett Cahill event that's going to be March 1st. And when we do those events, that helps generate an income for us so that we can continue to take care of these kids. So any home environment you could possibly imagine, however good or however bad you can think, those are the kids that we are serving. The admissions process at Boys Ranch is pretty intense. Normally we get about 60 phone calls a month from families looking for help with their boy. Now, we don't take 60 kids a month, and a lot of times how we help the family is that we recommend other facilities that may be better suited for their needs. We are a basic care facility. We can deal with issues with like dabbling with drugs, maybe having issues with the law or juvenile probation, kids that are more in line with suicidal ideation or wanting to kill themselves on a much regular basis. Those kids need a higher level of care. And so not only do we take those phone calls, but then we make recommendations if we can't help, where they can go to get help. As you can imagine, whenever we get those phone calls from those families, they're in desperate need of assistance. Most of them are looking to make a phone call and they want to bring that boy out immediately. That's where they are at in the circumstances with that child, that they just need them out. They need them somewhere. They need somebody to step in and take over for them. We don't operate that quickly. You know, the quickest that we have ever taken a kid is about 2 weeks once the process has been started. Sometimes it can take longer, and most of that depends on how quickly the family can get us the information that we need. And that's an extensive application process. And the reason for that is that we need to know everything about that boy and his struggles, or what he's dealing with, or what he needs help to improve, not because we want to take him away from that family. We want to arm him with the tools that he can go back into his home environment and make the right decisions and do the right things. Because once they turn 18 and they get out in this world, if they don't have the tools to make good choices, they're going to be back right where they started. So it's important that we go through that extensive application process. And you'd still be amazed about the information that's left out. And so I'll give you an example. And I don't remember the kid's name, and as you can imagine, I've sat in on many of these, what we call pre-placements. But we had a boy that was there with his mother, and she was seeking help and assistance, and one of the things that he was going to have to overcome was dabbling with marijuana. And let me go back. So whenever they come in for a pre-placement, typically it's a family. It could be several family members with this boy. Sometimes it's just one. But we may have 6 to 8 staff that are in that room doing this interview with this boy. And those interviews can last 2 hours, sometimes longer depending on the information that we're receiving or not receiving. And our staff have a lot of experience with juvenile probation, with CPS. We have a lady now with state school experience, and so we know how to ask the tough questions to elicit an answer, because we don't accept "I don't know," right? Because we need to know. And so sometimes it can get emotional for the child. A lot of times there's tears. Digging in to some of these situations, it's a child who his father's been in the penitentiary his whole life, and he's never got to see him. And there's that disconnect of wanting or longing for a father figure that will never be there. But going back to this specific case with this mother and this boy, I think he was probably 13, and he was getting in trouble with using marijuana. And we asked him, I would say half a dozen times, where are you getting it? Is it from your friends? Is it from school? And he was cagey. He did not want to give up where he was getting his marijuana from. And his mother was sitting next to him, was very quiet, not saying much. A lot of times we will have parents who will speak up and help give assistance or help give answers. She was just as cagey as he was. And eventually, when asked and pressed a little bit further, he was getting the marijuana from his mother and smoking it at home and taking it to school. She wasn't giving us that information. He didn't want to give us that information. And so I say that to say this: the home environment is so bad that it's typically the adults in the kids' lives that are creating the issues, that are creating the problems. These boys are just doing everything they can to survive in the environment that they are in. A lot of the kids that we get, they leave the house, they don't come home, there's no curfews, they do what they want to do, and the mother doesn't know, or the guardian or the grandmother doesn't understand why they don't mind. Well, typically they're not there in the kid's life. That's generally the reason. There's no one there who cares. There's no one there to cook supper every night at 6:30. There's no one there to help ensure that their homework is being done. It's fascinating. Most of the kids that we get within the program are failing, if not all, most of their classes in school. Every one of them. We've got pre-placements next week. I can tell you they're probably failing all their classes. It's not because they're not smart. It's not because they can't do the work. There's nobody who cares enough at home to make sure that they do it. Even after they get to the ranch, they still struggle with their schoolwork. And when they may get a 0, and they may get low scores. They may not turn in homework, but they do the work. And it sits in their backpack. And they just don't turn it in because they got by with that at home. Mom, dad, step-parents, grandparents didn't care enough to check what their grades were. Didn't care enough to check, why didn't you turn in this assignment? So it's not uncommon for boys to come to us failing, and then within 6 weeks or 9 weeks, depending on the cycle, them being on the AB honor roll. It's very likely that that's going to happen. But those are the type of kids that we get through this admissions process. It can be challenging. Again, 2 to 3 hours for this pre-placement. We know very quickly if we can help this kid or not. What we do once we complete the process, they step out, they may leave. Some families are from San Angelo. A lot of families may travel 3, 4, 5, 6 hours. Most of our kids that we take are from the state of Texas. We do the contiguous states surrounding Texas because we want to help as many kids as we possibly can. But you get an idea about the admissions process and what we're trying to accomplish. Once we get a kid here, a day in the life of a boy varies depending on the time of year. So we've got a lot of programs that we use to provide opportunities for the boys that they may not otherwise get. So in the summertime, a day in the life of a boy is, it's the big program in the summer is our work bell program. The boys work from 8 to noon, 5 days a week, and they get to earn spending money. They enjoy, believe it or not, they enjoy working. For the boys that are older and have the appropriate levels, they can request to work in the afternoons. And I don't know how many of you in here come from a ranching family or have a small piece of property that you work, but mesquites are an issue in most places in West Texas. Roger works with mesquite, he knows. But one of the most popular jobs we have on the ranch is spraying mesquite. And we have little John Deere gators that may go about 10 or 15 miles an hour, and we put a big spray rig on the back of it, and the boys get to spray mesquites. And so, the good thing about spraying mesquite is that they're not having to paint, they're not having to build fence or drive T-post. They get to drive around in the gator, and they get to have a little spray hose, and they get to spray the mesquites to kill them. And they can do that all day long if they want to, and we don't mind. We've got plenty of mesquites to spray. But other jobs on the ranch, building fence, painting. We use boys. We train them to be lifeguards, and so we've got a swimming pool out there. They can earn extra money being a lifeguard on duty. But it teaches a work ethic, because once they leave here, once they leave the ranch at the age of 18, they're not all college material. A lot of them will go straight to the workplace. Some of them may go into the military. But we use the Work Bell program to teach them the basic necessities of going out into the job market and finding a job. Reading a tape measure. It's important. There's not a lot of young people these days that know how to read a tape measure, right? I mean, nationwide as a society, we're talking about these skilled laborers and the money that they can earn, but we don't have the workforce or the young people growing up in such an environment to be able to take those jobs. We teach them that at the ranch. Lots of our boys, if they don't go to college or trade school, they go to the oil field. And so those are very necessary skills that they need, because they don't necessarily have a family to fall back onto. They're not going to go back home and mom and dad put them up in an apartment for a couple of months till they get on their feet, till they find a job. That's not the home that they go back to. They need help. They need those job skills. They need to be able to work. But the Work Bell program is a phenomenal. It's a phenomenal program, and not much has changed since Roger was there, or since the very beginning of Boys Ranch. So we were given 963 acres to make a difference in the life of these boys, and that was given to us in the 40s. Back what we were doing in 1947, 48 or 49, are the same things that we are doing today. We're taking care of livestock. We're riding horses. We're working cattle and sheep when we have them. We're building fence. We're repairing fence. We build wooden picket fences around the cottages, their courtyards. We're painting, scraping paint and painting. All those same things that we've always done. What I tell people is that we still raise kids the way we were doing it 50 years ago. And I think with the audience here today, you understand what I mean by that. Hard work, respect, perseverance, because that's what they're going to need when they go off into life at 18 or 19 or 20. So the work bell program is very important to us. So they do that from 8 to 12. What we do in the summer times as well, because it gets really hot riding horses in the afternoons or evenings. So this last summer, the boys were getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they were getting to the horse barn, and they were feeding horses. They were getting saddled up, and they were spending an hour riding in the arena and sometimes out in the pasture, working on their horsemanship skills before they went to work, which says a lot about them because they loved every bit of it. All you have to do is put a child in a position or an environment for positivity, and they will thrive. Now, how many people in this room think getting a 14-year-old boy up at 6 a.m. in the morning is easy? Right? I mean, you don't see that. You don't think that that's even possible. But when there's a purpose and they see the value and the benefit, and let's be honest, everybody wants to be John Wayne. Everybody wants to be a cowboy. These boys want to be cowboys too. Most of them come from bigger cities. They've never seen a horse, never petted a horse. They want to get out there and get horseback because it makes them feel good, and they want to be a cowboy. We had a kid, a specific story. Con was his name, and he was at Boys Ranch 15 years ago. And we had Con and his brother. The reason I think we took Con, he was a little bit on the lower IQ level, so he was probably a stretch to be brought out to Boys Ranch, but we took him because we'd had his brother as well. And his biggest thing was wanting to be a cowboy and ride horses. And he was Filipino. His dad was Filipino. His mom was American. And he loved going to the horse barn. He had his black felt hat on all the time. He made a pair of chaps in the leather shop, and he'd wear them every time he got horseback. And the name of his horse was Widowmaker. And he named her that because she was a bronky horse, right? In reality, Widowmaker was about 25 years old, probably wouldn't even crow hop, but for Con, it was a wild Mustang that he was getting on. And the pride that he had and the confidence that was instilled in him by riding that horse, we're trying to do that. There's not a lot of things these kids are proud of. There's not a lot of things that these kids have gone through that give them confidence. That's what we do with the ranch, with all of our programs. Work bell, horse barn. We just ended our 4-H program. The boys, probably late September, early October, we started receiving pigs at the ranch in our 4-H barn, and they get to go to stock shows. And so I think we had 15 pigs in the barn. I think we had 12 that got to go to the county stock show and show. But the lessons that they learn with working with these animals, not just the horses, but with the pigs. And so pigs are extremely intelligent. They're as smart as dogs. And a lot of our boys who come to us have ADD or ADHD. Patience is not something that they have. And of course, the younger generation nowadays needs that instant gratification. They're on TikTok or YouTube, and they're scrolling, and they're watching 15-second videos constantly. There's not a lot of patience in our young people these days. Well, whenever they have ADHD or ADD or this constant needing to scroll, you get into a pen with pigs. If you go hard and fast at that pig, it's just going to run, and you're going to chase it. And we watch boys chase their pigs around the pen. And so working with the boys and teaching them and having these teaching moments, if you just sit still, if you go into the corner and you just sit there, that pig will come to you. it's curious enough, it's going to want to meet you. It's going to want to see what you are or who you are. And so a lot of these boys will sit in the corner of this pen, and eventually those pigs get curious and walk over and start smelling the boot, smelling the jeans, and then smells the boy's hand, and then he begins to pet. And so not only are they developing a relationship at that time, which is something our boys struggle with their own families, but then can you imagine a family full of strangers at Boys Ranch that they've never met before? They're developing a relationship, working together for a common goal, because I've got to move you around a show ring. At some point, we have to be friends. So much so that they get so connected. We had a boy, Brody, this year, ADHD, but he was patient. And he's working with this in his head, because in his mind, he needs to get up and chase that pig to catch it so he can pet it. So he's beginning to work himself into patience and being calm. Pig walks up, they form a relationship, a bond. It became almost an issue, because if Brody was walking his pig around the arena, if he pet it too much, the pig laid down and rolled over and wanted its belly scratched, right? But these are the life lessons. These are the opportunities that we're looking to give these kids. Brody wouldn't have got to meet a pig or have a pig or scratch the belly of a pig in his home life. And so we give them these opportunities that they wouldn't otherwise have. Opportunities that maybe we, as young people growing up, took for granted. Maybe we thought everybody got these chances or these opportunities. But they don't. They don't get this. The kids that we get at Boys Ranch, they're not the kids that get to play Little League Baseball or Pee Wee football. Certainly not the kids that start soccer at 4 years of age. Their parents don't haul them to neighboring towns with teams to compete. Our boys are the ones that never got those opportunities. They didn't get to participate. They didn't get to do Little League. They didn't get to win trophies. They didn't get carried with their friends to go to out-of-town games. They were never given an opportunity. And as they got older and got into school, because nobody cared about their grades, they didn't get to participate in school athletics. They didn't get to do UIL or CX debate, or any of those things. They just got to go to school when they got themselves up, and then eventually made their way home after school to an empty house with nobody there, scrounging for something to eat, staying up playing video games, or going over to a friend's house, and nobody cared. Nobody checked on them. Nobody thought to ask them, how are you doing? What issues are you having today? We take these things for granted, and it's a horrible environment that kids are growing up in today. Much harder than when I was growing up, and much harder than when you were growing up. They've got so many things at their fingertips. Bad things at their fingertips. And if nobody is supervising that, imagine what they're getting themselves into. Horrible scenarios. So we get kids at the Boys Ranch, and we want to give them every opportunity we possibly can, every opportunity we can afford for them. Several years ago, Roger reached out and said, I need some help working in my wood shop. Can I have a boy come out and help on a weekend or two a month? Roger, how long ago did you start that with the Boys Ranch boys?
I don't know, because 25 years ago I started working with kids from this church. And over time, that became a little more of a challenge. And so I transitioned to using boys from the Boys Ranch. So maybe 4 or 5 years ago, something like that.
So Roger, probably at least a Saturday, 1 or 2 Saturdays a month, sometimes more depending on his schedule, but we will deliver a boy or two to Roger's house, and he will spend all day working those boys in his wood shop. And the boys enjoy that, but I think Roger enjoys it just as much as the boys do.
It's real interesting to watch a young man who maybe has never worked before learn to work, and it's surprising the things that you remember from it. So I'm going to back through a few experiences. Weekend before last, a young man was working for the first time ever. And my deal is, we start at 8 o'clock in the morning, we work until noon, and then I go somewhere and buy them lunch. And then we go back to work. And sometimes I have to go back to the ranch at 2, and sometimes it's 5. Anyway, my deal is, if you're a new guy, you get to pick where everybody gets to eat. So I named all these places down Knickerbocker. And he said, I don't know anything about those. And I said, okay, let's think hamburgers, chicken, or Mexican food. And he said, oh, a hamburger would be great. And I said, that would be Whataburger. And he said, I know nothing about that. So we went to Whataburger, and during lunch, I casually said, and I'm going to call everybody Jack so that I can keep it neutral. I said, Jack, where is home? And he looked at me and he said, I don't know. I almost cried. How can a 14-year-old boy not know where home is? Oh my gosh. So a few months before that, this young man who had a voice that was really deep, really deep, but really quiet. I mean, he didn't say much, and you could tell he was really new to what was going on. And when it came time to pay him, he stood there while I wrote out the check. And I glanced up, and his eyes were sparkling. He had never had a check in his life. He had never been paid for anything that he had done. It was a completely brand new experience for him, and it was enlightening, and it just lifted him. And when he came back, he was even more eager than ever to work. So, yeah, I think I get more out of this. I pay the guys more than they're worth, and I pay them through the lunch hour. But when I was working some boys from Sierra Vista, I had 2 brothers working for me one day, and I handed them, the older boy his check and the younger boy his check, and his mother saw the check and she grabbed it and she said, that's wrong. And I took the check from her hand and I put it back in her son's hand, and she says, that's too much. He's not worth that. And he was just a little guy, and he was being paid way, way more than what he had contributed. And I said, there's this idea at church that we call grace, which is unmerited favor. And there's this idea that we have been loved more generously than we deserve. And I think later in life, this young man is going to have a family and he's going to hire somebody. And I want him to be gracious to this young man. And she said, okay, he can have the check. But that's kind of the way, I work with the kids.
Well, and I think this is a great time. I've spoken to you for about 45 minutes now, and I have only scratched the surface of West Texas Boys Ranch and the differences that we have on these kids. But what I would like to do is open it up for questions. Maybe you don't know much about Boys Ranch. Maybe you do. Maybe there's some misconceptions or something you need answered. But I am here to answer those questions. Roger, with his expertise and experience, can answer questions. And we've got Audrey Kothman. She's our donor relations director in the back. She's here, and she can help answer any questions that you may have. So with that being said, do you have any? Yes, ma'am. Okay.
Do the boys enter the transition program like the girls do? Roger, can you give her the mic? We can hear her. Can't believe they can't hear me. I said, do the boys enter the transition program like the girls do from girls,
Okay.
Concho Valley?
Great question. And so the girls that we take at the girls' home and the boys that we take at Boys Ranch, they're not foster care kids. They're private placements by families or juvenile probation departments. So the transition program identifies a completely different set of at-risk kids who need assistance. Yes, ma'am, Linda.
You might want to touch on the homes that they live in and how comfortable they are and how they're raised with a family.
Yes, ma'am. So the homes that the boys live in, we've got 5 cottages. We usually have 4 in operation, and we have 8 boys' bedrooms in a cottage. So they share hallways. 2 boys will share a hallway, and they'll share a bathroom. But when they were originally built, they're about 8,300 square feet. When they were originally built, they were built for 2 boys in a bedroom. And as you can imagine, the boys and the backgrounds that they come from, that may not be such a good idea. And so back way before my time, the ranch decided to have 1 boy in a bedroom. And that way, that was his safe place. That if he was having the bad day or wasn't doing well or needed his space, he could go to his bedroom. So at one time, I think in 1971, we had a cafeteria built out there. And I think when Roger was there, it was last used as a cafeteria. We were going or transitioning into that family-based model of care. And so when we built the cottages, we put big dining room tables in there. And so as a family, the boys sit at a table and have meals together. And a lot of times they do devotionals, they pray before they eat, and they sit down as a family and they talk about their day as a family. And, promoting that family-based model of care, they also go to church in town as a family. And so we have just built a brand new chapel out there at Boys Ranch. It's the biggest building, and the cross is the highest thing out there at Boys Ranch at the steeple. So being a Christian organization is extremely important to us. So they will go to town to church as a family on Sunday mornings. They will go to chapel service at Boys Ranch every Sunday afternoon. And we usually start that about 5:30, and so we have different churches or church groups that come out for that 30 minutes on Sunday afternoons to do chapel service. We have Garden City Baptist Church about an hour and 40 minutes away, that drive over one Sunday a month with, I think, almost their entire congregation. And they provide chapel service, and they play games, and they cook for our boys to have a meal. And if we let them, they would come every Sunday. But we want to open it up for multiple churches in the community to come out and do chapel service with our boys. Yes, sir.
I have several questions, but one I want to start with, I guess all the boys go to school.
Yes,
but
sir.
the pictures, and what I see is that they seem to go to different schools.
Mm-hmm.
Some may go to Erie County, some may go to something in San Angelo or someplace else.
Mm-hmm.
What determines where they go to school? Who decides that, or how does that work?
Great. So we have two schools that we go to, San Angelo Independent School District, and we made that transition several years ago. And so the elementary is Bonham, the middle school is Lone Star, and then Central High School. We were seeing a lot of kids coming into or going through the admissions process that we felt they needed an on-campus school. Going to a big public school for some of these kids was not in their best interest. And so we were recommending them to another facility who had an on-campus school. We decided we were tired of not being able to help those kids. And so we have a partnership, MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, with Brooks Smith ISD, and they are somewhere close to Abilene, Texas. I don't know exactly, maybe 15 miles outside of Abilene. And so we at Boys Ranch, we have a classroom, and we are considered an external campus for Brooks Smith. And so they have hired a teacher and a teacher's aide, and they teach our boys and a handful of our girls from the girls' home at the West Texas Boys Ranch. And so we are no longer sending those kids somewhere else. We're keeping them here with us to go to school on campus at West Texas Boys Ranch. What determines them to be in that program versus public school? It's going through the admissions process. A lot of the kids have issues at school, maybe dabbling with drugs, skipping, those kinds of things. Maybe they run away or have run away in the past, and so we will start them off at school on campus. And through that time, 6 months, 12 months, or if it's extended, if they have the appropriate behavior and they're getting good grades and there's a desire to go to public school, if we think they can manage that, then we can move them into a regular public school. Most of our boys are going to school on ranch. We have, I think, 4 that go to school in San Angelo currently.
So for the boys who go to,
Mm-hmm. It's on.
okay. The ones who go in Brooksmith on campus there at the Boys Ranch, say they want to be involved in extracurricular activities from that school, from Brooksmith. I mean, how do they do that? Hey, I'd love to play football, or I'd love to be involved in some UAL thing. Or can they do that, or
No,
they do?
no. The distance too far to be able to participate in a team sport is not viable. So we find other opportunities for them. We do a lot with the Horse Barn program. We have a new welding shop, the Ella Williams Vocational Building. And some of the pictures you may see, the boys made centerpieces for our ranch ball event. They welded horseshoes together, a praying cowboy at a cross, and those kinds of things. But we keep them active at the ranch. They do get to go to Wednesday night youth group, and so they have opportunities to do those kind of extracurricular activities. But working on the ranch, stock showing, horse barn, and work opportunities, we try to keep them as busy as we can. Now, we've said that we will keep the swimming pool open year-round, but we've not having any boys wanting to go swimming lately. But they can do that if they want.
Especially a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, sir.
Well, one question that came up, like maybe everybody's wondering this. We talked about all the social media and all. Do they have cell phones?
No.
Or-
Well, they're not supposed to have cell phones. So we do not allow boys to have cell phones out there at the ranch. Now, that doesn't mean we've got a boy, and we've done this for boys in the past, if they get jobs after school or in the summertime where they work in town, we can work out, we'll sign a special contract with them, and they'll be able to get a phone because they're traveling to and from town and work. So we allow them those opportunities, but for most of the boys, 99% of them, we don't give them access to cell phones. They don't have those opportunities. Now, it doesn't mean that they go home for a home visit and somebody gives them a cell phone to bring back out to the ranch. And we just went through this Friday evening. We identified 2 phones at the ranch, and they were confiscated, and we had deliberations Monday morning about cell phone use and what they were doing. And the boys from Doss Cottage spent all day working at the horse barn, and the boy that wasn't back on Monday, he gets to work all day at the horse barn on Friday.
Yes. Okay, as the boys finish, they get too old to be there anymore. Now they're going to go out in the world. Do you keep up with boys as they go out and feedback as to this boy did this or this boy went so and so? What sort of give me some idea of where they do what they do when they get out, and
Sure.
Are they successful or are they is it mediocre? What happens?
Sure. So, yes, when the boys graduate, they turn 18, they really have 3 options: going into the workplace, going into the military, or going to college or trade schools. So, when they go to college or trade school, we have a scholarship endowment fund that we can help pay for that at no cost to the boy. And so we have 3 boys that are currently going to college that we are paying for 100%. So we've got 1 boy at Midwestern State in Wichita Falls. We've got 1 boy at UNT, North Texas in Denton, and we've got 1 boy at Angelo State University. We have 1 boy, Alex, he's on these pictures. This week he's going to a welding school outside of Houston with his cottage parents to visit the campus. He wants to become an underwater welder. So those boys, because we scholarship them every semester, they stay in close contact with us. They have to give us their grades, to tell us how they're doing, because they have to reapply for a scholarship every semester. Boys that go into the military or go straight to the workplace, we maintain a relationship as much as they want to have. So there's going to be some that leave the ranch that are going to call back every month to visit. Some of them will come back and spend a week with their old cottage parents on campus. Some of them will take leave. Preston, who probably is 26, 27 now. He's in the military. He's a Black Hawk helicopter mechanic. He comes back every year and spends a week with his cottage parents at the ranch. And so we stay in as close a contact with them as they want to have with us. There are some boys that whenever they leave, they're marking X's off a calendar because they can't wait till they leave. And so for those boys, they may not reach out to us for many years. Going back to the success of the boys when they leave, that varies because that's very dynamic. As we may have experienced while we were growing up, or maybe our children, they may be doing great for several years, and then they may do something and they hit a snag and they stumble and they fall, and then it may take them years to pick themselves back up to get back to a good place. And so I can't answer your question the way you may want it answered, but because they're always going to make mistakes. They're always going to stumble. They're always going to fail to a degree. It's the rebounding and getting back up. And quick story, we had a back-to-school fundraising event that we used to do out there at Boys Ranch. The G family did that for us. And part of that event is that they would do a poker run. And they would bring guys and gals on their motorcycles out there to Boys Ranch on Sunday morning and let the boys look at the motorcycles. We had one boy try to trade his horse for a motorcycle. It didn't work out, but that's what he wanted to do. And Russ Frazier would come out and do chapel service. And a side note, buzzed head, a big Fu Manchu mustache, no sleeves on his T-shirt, a leather vest, and you think, my goodness, well, that's what the boys are used to seeing in their home and life. Russ did a great job connecting with those kids because he was what they were used to seeing. A First Baptist preacher with the suit and tie and nicely combed hair didn't make nearly the impact as Russ would make with those kids. But one of the participants one year, he was an older man, probably in his mid-50s, looked rough.
That's a young man.
Young man, comparatively speaking. But a little bit rough. You could tell he'd had a hard life. And we were visiting, and he was a former Boys Ranch boy. And he left Boys Ranch, and he struggled for many years. Alcoholism, drug addiction, being to hold down a job. And at that point in his life, he was starting to heal and make headway and make better decisions. And so, yeah, was he successful? Maybe not under what you and I may think about success, but he was turning his life around at whatever age. And he was doing well enough that he wanted to come back out and show his motorcycle and share his testimony with the boys that we had at the ranch. And so I would say that's pretty successful. Miss Miller has a question in the back, Roger, sorry.
With regard to the girls' home, do they still have the two houses for the girls' home that they had before, and how many girls do they usually accept?
Okay. So we have one home at the girls' home that we use, and it's got 6 bedrooms. So we only put one girl in the bedroom. So our max capacity currently is 6 girls. We do have the other home, the Tucker House, which they had stopped using as a home in recent years, and they were using as an emergency shelter for children. And they got out of that business before we took them over, and we didn't continue with that program. And so we operate with one home, and we have the Tucker House. It's not in great shape, and it's not laid out to where you would want to use it as a girls' home in that sense.
So you're helping these boys with their college education. So they age out off the ranch at age 18, is that correct?
Correct.
And then you can continue on with helping them through college.
Yes.
So really they don't age out totally until they're in their 20s, I guess.
No,
Early 20s.
right. For those kids that are continuing their education, going to college or trade school, whether they're 18 or 19 or they're 26 and they decide they want to go to college, we'll help them go to college. And what we do when we scholarship these kids is we get them into the dorms. If they want to go to a vocational or trade school, we help them pick one out that has dormitories, because we'll write a check to the college to pay for the dorms. We'll buy them the best meal plan they can get. We'll cover their tuition. We'll cover their books, because we want them to be able to focus on school. We don't want them struggling with a part-time job trying to make ends meet. Yes, sir.
Is there any interaction with the family after the child comes to live with you? As far as the family comes out to the ranch, or they do or they don't? Does the kid ever get to go back home? Does he stay there the whole time? That's one question. Do they all stay until they're 17, 18? Or do you ever have any child or boy, young man, that after 6 months we took him in and we just can't not seem to get things under control?
Sure.
I'm just thinking about my own experience with a 16-year-old or something. God, not. I was
Yes.
curious about some of those issues you might have. Also curious about if they go to Central High School, how do you handle things like they want to go to the homecoming game or a dance or something like those types? Just curious how that works.
Good. Okay. So yes, the families have opportunities to spend time with their kids. So we don't take conservatorship. They are just what we consider a private placement. And so we have weekends where we have activities at the ranch. And so we'll, in the summer, not used to be the summertime, in October, we have the Boys Ranch Rodeo, where the boys get to compete in about 6 or 8 different events. We invite the families to come out and participate and watch their boys compete. The boys have opportunities to go home and spend long weekends. The boys can go home for Christmas. They can go home for spring break. And there's opportunities in the summertime for home visits. It may not be with the parent that placed them. They could be going home to an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent, but they have opportunities to get off of ranch to do those things. The sad thing is that the boys who don't get to leave the ranch because their families don't want them to come home, or they come up with reasons why their home visits get canceled. That's sad when a boy doesn't get to go home, but something just as sad, and we've just experienced this, is that when a boy has an opportunity to go home for a week and mom brings him back the next day, so he gets one day at home. We've had a boy who was getting to go home, and he earned some money, he got some money in his pocket, and Dad wanted his money. He said, "I'm not giving you my money." And he said, "Then you're not coming home." And he turned around before they made it off the grounds, drove him back to the house, and dropped him off. We do try to work with families, family counseling, joint counseling sessions. A lot of that depends on the family's willingness to participate. And through my experience as a whole, a lot of times the families feel the issues are with the boy and not themselves. And because they don't realize that they don't need counseling, the boy needs to be counseled. So going back to your second question about homecoming dances, and yes, we've got a boy, Matthew. He's been with us probably 5 years now, since he was a 7th grader. He plays.
I work with him each week.
He plays football at Central. He's a junior this year. He was JV, probably going to make varsity next year. So So we haul him into town early morning for football workouts throughout the summer. If he wants to go to homecoming, absolutely he can go. Corona. Does anybody remember Corona's former wear in town? So we used to go get tuxes for our boys there, but whenever they closed, they gave us a bunch of pants and vests and jackets and shoes and socks and ties. So we are outfitted, so whenever they want to go to the prom or a dance, they just have to go to the room and pick out the size that fits them. In years past, we've had several boys go to homecoming, and they didn't have dates, but the ladies at the junior league went down to Randall Motors and got a Cadillac Escalade, and they drove the boys to prom and then picked them up and brought them back out to Boys Ranch after it was over. So, yes, they get to do those kinds of things. We want them to be as active as they possibly can get, and that can be strenuous on us as parents making those trips into town, but no, Matthew wants to go to prom, he gets to go to prom. You've seen some football pictures. Ulysses is an 8th grader. He was the starting quarterback on the B team, 8th grade B team, fastest kid on the field, but he's about this big. But Mazin, starting wide receiver, he's about this big, but we keep them active and we give them every opportunity we can. There was a third part to your question. Remind me what that was. Did I cover it?
Maybe start, do they all
Okay,
out,
sure.
quit or don't make it all the way? Or?
So we ask that families give their kids or leave their kids with us for at least 12 months. And we think that's enough opportunity for us to give them the foundation that they need to be able to go back home and make the right decision, even if the environment may not be good for them. Because once they turn 18, they're going to be in all different kinds of environments, and they have to make the right decision. And so some boys will stay for that 12-month period and go home. Several will choose to stay. We've had, Jonathan was with us for 7 years. He didn't necessarily choose that. His family just didn't want him to come back home. He never got to visit home in 7 years. And he struggled with those times when everybody else got to go home and he was there by himself. And so for those kids, they get opportunities to go do things in the community when everybody else is at home. So we were given certificates to go to paintball, to the jump park, movie theater tickets. We try to keep them busy too. But no, if we take a boy who's 12 and he stays 12 months, the family can take him home after that. There are things, we'd love to say that we're 100% on a success rate with these kids, but there are some kids that will do whatever it takes to be discharged from the program. Right. Sure. If a child, a boy, tries to physically assault a staff member, threatens it, we can't keep those kids around. If we have kids who are running away, the flight risk, we will discharge those kids. Now, I'll say this in response to that. We had a boy that was going to public school before we had the on-campus school. He did not come home, he was a freshman, did not come home after school one day. Of course, we reached out to SAPD. He ends up calling us the next morning about 6:30 or 7. I missed the bus. I didn't have access to a phone. I tried to call. I spent the night underneath the bridge at the Lily Pond. Normally, we would have discharged that kid. It was iffy on the story. We kept him. He was a San Angelo kid. 2 weeks later, he did it again. But it was days before we knew where he was at. And he was at, I think it's Crossing Arms Apartments there between Coingham and Bryant at that Denny's, that Stripes and that Denny's. He was staying somewhere at that apartment complex, and he was walking over to Denny's once or twice a day, and they were feeding him a meal. They felt sorry for him, and we were given a call. That kid was discharged from our program. Now, we have an on-campus school now. We got a call from his family again saying, can he come back? And we did accept him because we have an on-campus school, and there's no risk of him running away because he doesn't get to go to town that often. He'll get to go to church, Wednesday night youth group, and if they decide to go out and eat, something like that. But if we only had the option of a public school, we would not have been able to accept him back.
Let me tell 3 stories that tie into some of your questions. Bobby Ellis was pintoed like so, and Bobby would look at you like this. In the fall of 1989, I was living at the ranch temporarily. I walked out of the apartment to come into town for the evening, and Bobby Ellis was sitting on the curb in front of his cottage. And he kept looking to the right. 1.3 miles down the road is the front gate to the ranch. And I greeted him, Bobby, what are you doing? He says, I'm waiting for my mama. My mama's coming to see me this weekend. And I said, this is great. And we talked about it. And I said, well, you have a great time with your mama. And so I went to town, came back that night. Bobby wasn't there. Next morning I got up and I walked out, and Bobby was back on the curb. It's 2026 and his mama hasn't shown up yet. She never, ever showed up. A young man, I don't even remember his name, would go home for a home visit. And Child Protective Service at that time required a periodic home visit, the goal being family reunification. And every time he came back, it took us 6 weeks to get him functioning again. And after the 3rd time, we found out what the problem was. When he went home, instead of sleeping in the house, he slept in a chicken coop. And the reason he slept in the chicken coop is his father would not sexually molest him in the chicken coop. Whew. And then we're going to end on a very funny story. But I'm going to tout this guy right now. The job he does and they do at the ranch is a really hard job. It's emotionally very, very hard because you deal with these type of dysfunctions all the time. So now, to close our time on a light note, one morning, Tim Job, who was my ranch manager at the time, reported to the staff one of the cottage parents said, one of my boys is missing. And we did the entire campus search, and Tim started checking vehicles. The only vehicle missing was a tractor. And Tim said, he's somewhere on that tractor, and we don't know where. And about that time, Tim got on the phone and called this boy's mother in Big Spring. 90 miles away. Called his mother in Big Spring and said, we can't find, I'm going to call him Jack. We can't find Jack this morning, and the only clue we've got is there's a tractor missing. By any chance, do you know anything about Jack? And she said, no. And they were conversing, and she says, oh, wait a minute. Here comes a tractor into our backyard. He had driven that tractor all night long on the highway or in the bar ditch as necessary and had gotten to Big Spring. We didn't dismiss him, but it was too funny. Jeremy, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and I've got business cards out front if you want some, and you can call me anytime. Thank you. Thank you.